Hey, it's Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh install for the 2022 and newer Subaru WRX. I'll show you step by step how I made this grill that I'm holding right now. And this all starts by popping your hood. Then removal of the trim piece on top of the bumper. There's going to be two different style push rivets here, as well as some 10mm bolts that need to be unfastened to free this part. On the inner wheel wells, there are two push rivets shown here that need to be removed. And under the bumper, there will be a few more push rivets, and there are a couple that require a twist out with a flathead screwdriver. Afterward, start on the wheel well side and pull the bumper away and out. After the bumper is pulled out a few inches, detach any wiring harnesses that are connected to components on the bumper and set the bumper off to the side. On the back of the bumper, there's going to be a handful of small Phillips head screws to remove, and be sure and keep those screws. Now just a few push clips are holding the grill in place. And once released, the grill will come right out and we can start work on it. Now, the grill that I started with actually had a damaged corner. At the time of making this video, OEM parts are still hard to come by and the grill needed to be repaired. Skip to about 11:45 if you want to see how I repaired this area for the grill build. Alright, let's get down to business by flipping this around so we can remove some of the other parts. I'm just going to remove the camera hole cover and the emblem. These are just some Phillips head screws and are a quick and easy step to do early on. What I'm going to do next is take out the center section by carefully cutting around the perimeter at a very specific depth. I like to start the cutting on this from the back of the grill because I can get a much better angle of approach. And to do the cutting, I'll be using my Dremel, and it's equipped with their number 543 cutting and shaping wheel. I'm following around the perimeter of the mesh area, staying about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. It might take a couple different angles of approach to get in all of the areas while keeping distance from the solid edge, but it's possible with a little bit of patience. If the cutting wheel doesn't cut all the way through some parts, don't worry. A simple handsaw like this one will work right through the partially cut areas fine. Once the center section is fully cut, then it can be lifted out and thrown away. There's a couple of spots that I didn't get in as close to the edge as I wanted, so I'll use the top of the shaping wheel to push that out a little bit further. The top of the wheel is highly abrasive and works well for this type of work. Now that I have the center cut out and the edge trimmed up a little bit, now it's time to cut the depth of the grill. There's a well-defined line on the bottom that I think will work great, but the upper portion looks to be missing any clear-cut areas to use, so I'll need to make my own. To make this cut line, I'll grab some low-adhesion masking tape. This version's about a 1/4 inch wide and will contour around the edge easily. I'm putting the edge of the tape right up against the edge of where the mesh was on the old grill. This will give us the maximum depth possible that won't require any major repair afterward. For the upper corners, I'm fading the depth between the upper and lower half to create a logical transition between the two of them. Here's how mine looks before cutting. And it's important to note that I'll be cutting through a portion of the mounting tabs that's closest to the edge, but under no condition do I want to cut all the way through these mounting tabs. And get a good visual of the cutting depth before proceeding. Okay, it's time to do some cutting now, and I'm primarily focused on trying to keep a steady hand and getting a good clean cut at this point. It's fine to leave a little extra material and refine it down later if you're not familiar or confident in doing these types of mods yet. Some portions of the cut area may still be attached around the mounting tab, and those may require a different angle of approach to break loose, like shown here. These cut parts can be thrown away, and what will likely be remaining will be some burnt-on bits that will be melted to the back. Most of these burnt bits can be picked off by hand, but if they're really stuck on, don't worry, because we can go back and do a quick pass of the wheel again to break them loose. Next up, I'll cut the lower edge. No tape line is really needed here because I'll just follow along the prominent edge shown here. But if a tape line will help, feel free to lay one down. The most important thing is really just to keep a steady hand and get an accurate cut. Again, it's fine if the cut is back a little bit further because we can refine it down. But when it's finished, the final cuts need to be right at this line for our mesh piece to fit properly. Once the cuts are made, the lower edge can be broken off fairly easily and thrown away, just like the top edge before. And again, the burn-on bits can mostly be picked off by hand, but you'll likely encounter a few that are stuck on there pretty good. In that case, let's make another pass with the shaping wheel. The point isn't to push the cut line any further than what it needs to be. I'm just gliding along the shaping wheel on the back edge to break loose any remaining bits and even out any wavy spots. Depending on your angle of approach, the sharp corners might need a little refinement. For me, I found it a bit tricky to get in there without potentially making some cuts in areas that I didn't want to touch. So I just took my time to carve this out properly. Like with the push tabs, I'm making a cut around these screw mounting posts on the inner edge. This is needed so that the new grill mesh can slide under the tab and avoid having any gaps from the front. Later in the video, I'll get a close-up of this cutout. The tape line can now be removed, and for owners who want to keep their original grill bezel the stock color, then pay no attention to the upcoming portion that involves some sanding. For this specific install, I wanted to change this color from the stock gray to a black. To get that started, I'll get my dual action sander out and equip it with a 180 grit sanding disc. I'm really just trying to scuff this up so that the new paint will more easily bond to the grill frame. There's no need to really dig in hard. I don't want to distort the shape of the stock grill body lines. The sander makes really quick work of this, and once done, I'll go back over my work before painting. Here's how my grill frame looks now. The cut depth looks great, and everything is looking super smooth. Let's take a closer look at some of those clip and mounting post cuts. As you can see here, there's a little bit of a gap on the inner portion of these spots, while the outer portion is fully intact. This is crucial for the mesh to slide into place properly. With everything good to go, I gave this a gloss black paint job, and this is looking super sleek now. I think it's a better fit for the vehicle, and it makes for a higher contrast color for the grille compared to the body color of the car in most cases. Anyway, this is looking really good, and I'm now ready for the mesh install. And speaking of which, here's the mesh piece that we have available for sale on our website. This is pre-cut and pre-bent specifically for the 2022 and newer Subaru WRX. The mesh is a hexagon shape that's made from aluminum, and it's been powder coated gloss black. It's also important to note that this mod does not work for the sport grille option. Okay, let's get back to the install by placing the frame face down. Before sliding the mesh into place, this is a good time to make sure that the grille frame mounting tabs have been properly cut. There needs to be about a 3/16 of an inch gap to slide the mesh under it, especially in these corner posts here. With the bent tabs facing forward, the mesh should drop right into place, only with slight adjustments to get the mesh underneath of the mounting frame tabs. Here's a close-up of what the mesh looks like seated under the grille frame tabs. It's a tight fit, but we got it in there, and I'm ready to bond these together. To temporarily attach the mesh and frame together, I'll grab some cable ties and foam. I'm using the foam as padding against the new paint job so that the ties don't damage the finish. And the ties will hold the mesh tight up against the back of the grille frame while the adhesive cures. Simply run the tail end of the tie through the front of the mesh and then fasten the tie so that the head of the tie is resting on the back of the mesh, like so. The tie needs to be firmly fastened so that the mesh is flush up against the back of the grille in order to avoid any gaps between the two. But you don't want to over-tighten the ties so much that it will distort the shape of the grille. There's a bit of a balance between not tightening enough versus over-tightening. Simply work your way around the perimeter of the grille until the whole mesh piece is properly held in place. Then I'll check my work by flipping it around and looking from the front for any gaps. Overall, this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and get this permanently bonded together right after I cut off the tail end of the ties and throw them away. For an adhesive, I like to use a product called Automotive Goop, though faster curing epoxies such as Plyo Grip can work well too. For the goop install, I grabbed a toothpick as a dispensing aid, and I started to apply the goop in and around the mesh on the back of the grille. The channel that the mesh sits in is pretty small, so having something like a toothpick is very handy for controlling where the goop is going. It's super important not to spill any of this through the front of the mesh or onto the front of the grill. That could destroy the whole project. The goop is very cost effective and works well, but it does have a big drawback of needing about a full 24 hours to cure, so plan the installation accordingly if using this adhesive. I'll just work my way around the whole perimeter until the mesh and grill have full coverage, and then I'll walk away and let it sit for a day. When I came back, I went ahead and cut off the ties and removed them along with the foam and threw them away. The mesh install is now complete. Let's flip it around and see how it turned out. Wow, check this out. What a big difference this is from the stock grill that we started with. The badgeless design is super clean looking, and the newly blacked out frame really completes the look. Of course, now that we have a blank grill, custom emblems or lettering could be added if desired. Reinstallation of the grill is simple. Just pop it back into place until the clip clicks into the bumper. The screws that were taken out earlier can now be reused. And since the mounting posts were modified, I found that having a pair of pliers holding the mounting base in place was needed so that the torque of the screwdriver didn't break it off. Then, reattach any wiring harnesses, reinstall the bumper, close the hood, and we're all set now. Here's how the new grill looks outside, and I can't get over how good this looks. This all blacked out grill makes a big difference on the front end. Well, that's all I have for the normal install of this grill, and I hope you liked it. There is a little bonus material if you want to stick around for a moment though. Remember that broken tab I mentioned at the start of the video? Well, this is how I repaired it. I took my Dremel and cut the remaining bit that was holding it on. Then I scuffed up the cut edge of the corner that broke off with some 80 grit sandpaper, and then also scuffed up the grill side of things too. This looks like it lines up pretty good, so I first need to get some quick curing epoxy to hold the part in place. 3M makes a super fast plastic repair that sets up in about 20 seconds, and that's my go-to for stuff like this. I'm just going to apply a little bit on the grill side and then quickly get the broken bit in place and hold it there for a moment. I kept it in place for just about a minute just to be safe. Then, on the back of the grill, I shaved off some of the excess that oozed back there. The Dremel wheel does a pretty good job at this, but attention to detail is key here because I don't want to cut into anything that I shouldn't. After that, I'll dig out some of the epoxy with an X-Acto blade, but I need to make sure that I'm leaving enough of the plastic repair so that the broken piece is still properly held in place. Now it's time to use some 3M panel bond epoxy. This stuff is super tough, and it's going to hold up against the toughest punishment. And to make sure that I don't spill any through the front, I'll use some tape to contain any sort of spillage just in case there is any. After I dispense some in the damaged areas, I used a small brush to even out the application. This will help ensure full coverage and strengthen the repair over a broader area. Just like with the goop, this also takes about a day to cure, so I let this sit overnight and then came back to remove the tape. It's a good thing that I had the tape there because there was a little bit of spillage. There is a bit of temporary repair material on the front of the grill that needs to be addressed, so I got my dual action sander out and sanded it smooth from every angle that was needed. Lastly, I trimmed off the spillage on the panel bond with the Dremel, while making sure not to cut into the grill itself, and I'm pretty much done now. Depending on where or how the grill breaks, it can sometimes need additional repair on the front by carving out a V-shaped notch to feather out the repair even wider. But this was smooth to the touch, and once primered up, there was no signs of the crack. Well, that's all I have for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions about the install, feel free to contact me, and thanks for watching.